Yowzers! Fat guys should be able to fly.
Do, do, do,
And
do, do,
I just feel like I'm
do,
doing something
do,
wrong here.
do, 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 do,
But
do,
we're not
do,
giving
do.
up. We will get a fat guy to fly. Yep. I knew I should have bought that trumpet from Goodwill. Just ain't the same when I make the sound with my mouth. But it's the best I can do to honor my fallen heroes.
I have made a game where you raise a fat guy to jump a pool full of lobsters. Now you might be wondering to yourself, Lumberzack, who the hell are you and what are you doing in my feed? And to that I say, that is a valid concern. I have no idea who the hell I am either or how I got here. But since I'm here, let me tell you a little bit about my game. So, Video Game Donkey had announced the commencement of his annual Bigmode game jam, with the theme being slick. So I thought to myself, what mental images are conjured up when I think of the word slick? And immediately, the image of a buttered up fat guy fighting a pool full of lobsters popped into my head. And I know what you're thinking. And no, I am not autistic. My parents had me tested when I was just a child. And I passed. Now let's go ahead and get to the meat and potatoes of this. So I tried to fit the theme as best I could, and I came up with the idea of a physics simulator where friction and air drag are reduced by a slickness modifier. I also spent over 2 days working on a dynamic water system and wave generation by creating a top layer of the water surface that had 300 plus independent points, all interconnected, and I then put a sine wave through it at random intensities. And then I also made about 250 lobster objects and spawners throughout the pool, uh, which are also interacting with the water, capable of floating in it, bobbing, leaping out of it, going back in, all of which are capable of disrupting the water surface. Um, I I definitely think I could have used my time a little better. Then I doubled down and added a color changing hue shift depending on your PC's clock time, which will also cycle through all colors if given enough time. I was kind of going for a real trippy, happy vibe at the start as your fat guy dances his happy little cholesterol packed heart out, which then goes away the moment the state changes. And can I go back to that statement about me not being autistic? After reading this, I'm starting to have my own doubts. There's definitely something up here, especially because it's written on the back of an Arby's napkin. Huh. I want this video to be a pretty in-depth retrospective on the development of this game. This was my first game that I've ever actually completed. I mean, I've played around in different game engines before, Game Maker Studio, tried Godot before. I currently have bought probably $200 worth of assets for the Unreal Engine 5, which I probably will never be able to actually make a game on. Um, but let's talk about goals. So from the start, I always had a goal. I wanted this game to be featured on Donkey's live stream or to be featured in his summary video for the game jam. That was always my ultimate goal. That's what I'm still kind of hopeful for. And let's talk about how much time I sunk into this project to make that a reality. Hopefully. I probably spent at least 10 hours per day working on this game, adding up to a total of approximately 90 hours. That is a lot of time to spend on something as silly as this. But don't worry, I came prepared with some world-class exclusive excuses. Now, I don't think any game developer has ever said this before, but whenever I started really getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I realized I didn't know what I was doing. And yes, this is a completely unique experience only held by me. Is the realization as I went on that despite all my ideas and understandings of different data structures and workflows, that I, in fact, was a bit of an idiot when it came to coding. Shocking, I know. I've done everything possible to present myself as an absolute genius. In fact, just the other day at a park, somebody pointed out to me that my genius was showing. Now, stop me if you heard this one before. You played around in a game engine a few years ago. You got pretty decent at it, too. You made a few silly little games that you never released. You made a few, too many fart simulators or whatever the heck you did just to get you and your friends laughing. And then a few years pass, you work at a startup company. You work there at least 50 to 60 hours a week for 4 years. You give your mind, heart, and soul to them. You're on call 24 hours a day. And then January 1st comes around and you're told you're laid off. And now you got all the time in the world to just play around and make stupid, low effort games just to try to put a smile on your face. Oh wait, that didn't happen to you, just me. Anyways, enough about my backstory. I'll uh, I'll just vent to the workers at Wendy's from now on. They get me. So the biggest hurdle for me was basically having to relearn absolutely everything about Game Maker Studio since I last touched it a couple years ago. Now, maybe I'm just venting a little too much right here, but what is it with software developers in constantly changing the workflow inside their projects? It's like they do not want anyone to ever get comfortable with them or ever understand how the hell their systems work. I'm serious. Every tutorial I watched would be, fairly brief, fairly well put together, explain everything, and then you go to the top comment and there's somebody there going, "Oh yeah, by the way, you can't call functions anymore outside of a script. This was done several patches ago. The devs left a little patch note at the bottom that said, 'Get fucked, LOL.'" Like, seriously, what is it with that? Why can't they ever just keep any kind of cohesion in their design, philosophy? It just absolutely floors me that it seems like every time I want to follow a tutorial, I then have to go through the patch notes and multiple forum posts and comment chains trying to figure out how much something has changed. So after getting the main gameplay and the main room done, I moved on to probably what took the second most time out of every system I was trying to set up, which was the graveyard scene, where you have the manager walking with a bouquet of flowers, walking past all the headstones until he stops at the most recent one. Says a nice little speech which you can press space to skip. I got real tired of listening to those speeches real fast. I definitely should have cut down how long I made them. I think the longest one was 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But yeah, and then at the end of it, you find a homeless fat guy who basically tells you he'll be launched for food, and you adopt him. You give him a new name, despite him being a grown ass man, and you continue on with your experiment. Your curiosity of what happens if a fat guy jumps a lobster pool. And this room did present some challenges to me to get set up right. It is an ever expanding room with a repeating parallax in the background that every time one of your fat guys die, they add their name to the global death registry, and you also reset all the base stats for the object fat guy. And just trying to wrap my head around how to even program this, implement it, get it set up and actually working. That took me about 2 days. Tried a few different ways to actually have it work, and I think what I ending up with was just having an object that was just a graveyard camera that took control of the manager and just kind of put him in a constantly walk right sequence until he got to the desired spot, and then I had a trigger object spawn right there in line with the most recent headstone, and then another one. I'm pretty sure that I ended up just going with using a simple collision event for the fat guy that you meet there that you can then rename. So it was one of those things where it just took a lot longer than I thought. It was a lot more in depth than I thought it would be, and I do kind of regret a few things I really wanted to add. You do see the manager sprite from the back giving a salute and everything. I was going to have another pop-up box show up there with the manager mirroring the Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake scene where he's saluting graves, the grave of the boss and stuff like that. But, you know what? I just didn't have time. I do think that would have been a nice addition, but it is what it is. Alright. It is time for the most exciting part of these devlog videos, and that is talking about the bugs and the workarounds. So despite how well I had felt that I had structured everything at the beginning, I had tried very hard to make sure that any systems I implemented did not break the other systems, and I didn't do a great job at that, to be honest. There were definitely some oversights and design flaws that I had in there. For example, one of the first things I ever implemented was a debug panel, which ultimately became the sandbox mode early on in development, to help me dial in exactly how I wanted to scale the stats and just to make sure I was happy with how players would be able to progress. But I had also added an options menu that could be used to return to the hub if players selected to reschedule their jumps. Now, problem with that being that if you take the sandbox fat guy back to the hub area, you technically have the starting fat guy from the beginning of the game whose name is Larry. And Larry is missing some ID values that he needs to not crash the restaurant room and the Mr. Slick's room. And that was an oversight because I didn't think it through whenever I implemented this that, oh yeah, I should disable the panel in sandbox mode because if I would disable that panel, I would have to make an alternate panel so that people could go back to the title screen or they could close the game without having to control alt delete out of it. Which from playing some of the other games in the game jam, I kind of wish some other people would have thought of that too. I had to control alt delete out of a couple of them, but without going making that a whole side tangent, we did, and I did kind of find a problem there where players could unintentionally break the game immediately by trying to go to either the restaurant or Mr. Slick's after leaving the sandbox and going straight up to the lobster pool. That does launch you into the regular game. So essentially what players could do if they wanted was just do multiple runs inside the sandbox, rack up some money, and then go ahead and go back to the hub, go to the lobster pool, and like sacrifice one fat guy, go through the graveyard sequence once, get a new fat guy, and then they would have access to all that money. Which, even as I'm saying it right now, I'm kind of wondering if I actually fully fixed it because you can go to the main menu from that room. Shoot. Anyways, yeah, so that's one of the oversights I had. The mini games also just broke the physics at one point, and I'm not entirely sure how I screwed that up. I think that I probably tried to have the mini games assign a global value inside the game controller registry, and I'm sure that somewhere along the line I accidentally had the fat guy override their values whenever he was created. So, kind of like I said, I had everything compartmentalized so that I could go through and check everything and actually get it working, but just some unintended order of operation errors that I wasn't familiar enough to prevent from happening. Um, and another thing too, while I'm talking about the options menu, is you might notice that the sliders in the options menu don't affect the any of the music or sounds in the game, despite saying that they do. And there's a funny story behind that. I implemented the options menu before I recorded any of the sounds, and several days later, when I actually went around to recording the sounds and implementing them in the game, I did not remember to give them a classification or a category or anything to actually be affected by those sliders. So as it stands right now, the sliders are just kind of fun little vertical knobs that you can just move around. That counts as gameplay, right? Another thing too is just to try to prevent the game-breaking bugs I had mentioned with the sandbox mode and with the default fat guy, because technically during your first jump you would be able to exit out of the scene and kind of get your default Larry in the hub, creating the same issues as would happen when you're in the sandbox and going to the hub. I just ultimately disabled the rescheduled jump feature. It's not a pretty solution, but it's all I could do by the time I realized how big of a problem it was a few hours before submitting the game. Um, Yeah, speaking of the voice lines, though, they I think they came out okay enough. I ad-libbed all of them in one take. If I screwed up while talking, I just kept it in because I honestly felt it was pretty funny.
Ugh, waiter, I found pig whiskers in my ham. My compliments to the chef. Salad? Oh, you better put a lot of dressing on that. You want me to eat leaves? Like like rabbits eat? Can't I just eat a rabbit instead? Oh man, the farts I'm gonna have from this are going to be noxious. Oh no, I just remembered I have a shellfish allergy. Oh no. Now you might be wondering to yourself, Mr. Slick, where do you get all this industrial strength leaded lubrication that is used to make fat guys slick? Well, to that I say, you better learn not to ask Mr. Slick these kind of slippery questions. In summary, fat guy.
The intro also kind of pokes fun at me being kind of tongue-in-cheek, understanding I'm probably not going to have time to implement the rider system like I wanted, which was just going to be a really stupid idea of basically letting you have one of three different riders, whether it be a cowboy, a laid back surfer dude, or a businessman on your fat guy whenever he's down the slide and in the air to kind of help you steer a bit. Each one would give you a little different of a power thing I had to cut where whenever impact with the water was imminent, it was going to go slow mo and zoom in on the fat guy and the rider and do like a quick little exchange where the fat guy's like we're going towards the water. You need to bail out now. And the rider basically just telling you, no, I'm not going to treat you like how Mario treats Yoshi. We're going down together. And I feel that would have been a lot of fun to implement. There was also another thing I had to cut, which was an NPC that would push the fat guy. I was just going to tie it to the push power variable, and at 0 he would just clumsily fall off like he does now. At 0.1 it was just going to be a kid poking with a stick all the way up to 1.0, which was either going to be like a mule kicking him off or a wrecking ball coming in and hitting him off. Just things like that I had to kind of cancel due to time. Another thing I definitely did want to have into was between lives I wanted players to have a chance to grab different perks, and also I wanted the new fat guys to have randomly generated positive and negative stats, but I also did add I believe it's called a zoetrope in the game. Basically, whenever you have a image that whenever it's, whenever there's movement applied to it, it kind of looks like it's animated. I used Biggie, the Bigmode publisher logo. He made him a little silly dance he would do. Um, I don't feel it worked very well, mostly because the player travels in an arc normally, and it these effects kind of work better with straight line movement. I like that I still tried it. I think it was an interesting idea to implement. It just could have turned out better. And another thing I definitely wish I would have had the foresight to work on a little bit more. Um, it's kind of like I'm painting a picture right now. I definitely had to speed run finishing and polishing the game last minute to make it functional for submission. Um, Definitely wish I would have spent a little more time on the player model in the hub because 99% of the game's development, it was just a red circle. And then I added this little scumbag here last minute, literally within the last hour I worked on the game. And there was just something about his beady little smug face that I just fell in love with. And yeah, I mean, I somehow found the mental fortitude during my last hour or so working on the game to prioritize putting in Easter eggs around the game instead of actually fixing all of the issues I'm talking about here. Um, and that just kind of goes back to not understanding how to manage my time as well as I thought I did. I'm not unhappy with how the game turned out. I definitely think that I could take another couple days and actually kind of make my vision of it come true. I'm not sure if it would be worth it at this point, depending on the reception of the game. As it stands right now, at the time of recording this, I have 42 views, 16 downloads, and 5 ratings on the game. Um, I definitely wish I would have looked more into how to export a game before I started. I had the entire project set up for Windows, and I always wanted this to be playable inside a web browser, which means I would have had to set it up for HTML5. Whenever I tried to actually download that module into GameMaker Studio 2 to export it as an HTML5, the problem is for whatever reason, Game Maker Studio 2 would not download the module that it was offering me to download. And every time I tried to, it would crash the engine, and it would also destroy my file paths for some reason. I had to go through my computer and figure out where my project files had gone for my past projects and this project as well, which was a very frustrating thing. And I definitely feel as though that did limit my overall reach for the game. Mostly because I'm sure a lot of people are like me, a paranoid hermit that doesn't want to get a virus on his PC by downloading an exe file that is supposedly a quickly hobbled together video game. And yeah, I definitely wish I would have looked into all of this a lot more beforehand. Another thing I think I should have looked into more before starting was the correct video output. I knew going into it that I would have had to do a few things. That I had to make the viewport for the rooms and the room dimensions match, along with the camera settings match. Make sure that they were all the same. I ended up deciding on 1920 by 1080p, and for some reason, everything still kept coming out as compressed and looking like absolute crap. And I had to go through a lot of forum posts and YouTube videos before I found one comment that basically said, "Oh yeah, here's how you make the game not look like crap. Go to your global registry and you have to actually set how the window display will actually come out, and because it always goes to a default value apparently, so I had to set that to 1920 by 1080p." Looking at the other games that were offered in the game jam, I do think that I probably should have made my output a little smaller, probably half as much to a quarter, just keeping the same aspect ratios. Because taking up an entire monitor with this game is a little too in your face, I think. Um, but, I mean, overall, I'm not unhappy with how the game turned out. I really do think that it was a great learning experience. I do hope that I am featured in the stream, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'm very hopeful that, I get the Golden Dunk Award. Realistically, I just hope to be featured on the stream at all. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a nice night.
Why can't a fat guy fly? Oh, woo-hoo. Why can't a fat guy fly? Oh, woo-hoo. Why can't a fat guy fly? Oh, woo-hoo. Every day I look up from my beef burrito at a big old rainbow. I feel water on my face. I wonder if it's sweat or heartache at knowing my place. Down on the ground, shuffling on by. I feel it swelling up inside. This I just can't abide. Why can't a fat guy fly? Oh, why can't a fat guy fly? Oh, why can't a fat guy fly? Oh, whether I live or die, brother, I promise you, you're gonna see a fat guy fly.